Welcome to Beyond the Wild podcast, where we go venturing beyond the gear, beyond the subject, beyond the shot. Find the heart of wildlife and adventure creative. Beyond the Wild podcast is brought to you by Pictureline.com, your online source for everything photography, and Canon USA. Listen in, we share tips and tactics learned from years of journeying into the wild. Your hosts are Jason Loftus, Ron Hayes, and myself, Mark Raycroft. Let's begin another episode of Beyond the Wild.
Welcome back. It's been a bit since we've recorded. We haven't missed any of the weekly episodes because we had a few in the bank, but it has been a while since we've recorded. So Jason, I know you've been busy doing your favorite thing. We'll get into that on a later episode, but how have you been otherwise?
Been good. Just busy, like you said. You know, it's that time of year. Fall is my favorite. It's all of our favorite time. Let's just be real. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. You know, we talk about it every year, and it goes by so fast. I mean, I get blown away every year by how fast September goes by. I really wish September was at least 2 or 3 months a year, if not 9 or 10. But
yeah, I
what about
agree.
you? What have you been up to?
I could do it 13 months out of the year.
Oh, easy. 13. Yeah, there you go.
I've still been trying to put life together, and as you can see, there's some fine tuning that needs to happen, but the studio is almost done.
Yeah,
the office
fancy.
Is almost complete, but I've got to find the remote control that goes to the light so I can dim it a little bit on the sign, and then we should be ready to go. But no, things have been going well. It's been busy getting ready to go to Brazil. So that has occupied a lot of my thoughts.
When do you leave for that again?
The end of October. So potentially by the time this airs, I'll be back.
Nice.
Or I'll be there.
Yeah, I can't wait to do the episode on that. That'll be fun to hear how that goes. I'm excited for you.
I can't wait to make an episode on that. So this podcast, even though we're recording in the fall, this podcast kind of goes back to the spring. Chris Dickinson was a speaker. We went to the PhotoX at Pictureline this spring. And it is primarily, their spring PhotoX is primarily outdoors. So it's wildlife, ranching, lifestyle, outdoor lifestyle centric. Keith Ledzinski was another speaker at that, kind of talking about adventure photography. But Chris is one guy that we got to hear, and both Jason and I were immediately talking about, hey, we need to have Chris on because what we like to do, you know, Beyond the Wild had several connotations when we first started it, but one of them was to get beyond the images and get to the heart of the image makers. And I think when Chris spoke that night, and you guys are going to get introduced to him here in just a second, but when Chris spoke that night, I didn't know him. Jason knew of him, and I got to hear a guy's heart and why he did what he does. And I think that's the important thing and the primary topic of discussion that we're going to share tonight. But Chris, welcome, and thank you for your time. Welcome to Beyond the Wild.
Thanks, you guys. Ron, Jason, thanks for having me on here. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show with you.
We genuinely are honored. Ron and I mentioned it, or Ron mentioned already, but I just can't say enough about, like, I'm not joking when I say I was touched emotionally. I'm not ashamed to say that. Like, you hit a chord with me, and you can ask Ron. I've been talking about it ever since. And it's something that I appreciate from you and when in your talk that night. And we'll get into, you know, what you do and how that plays into this and, you know, why it touched me. But yeah, we're honored to have you. And I was shocked when we reached out and you had a little bit of time for us. So again, I thank you for making some time in a very busy season for you to jump on and join us too. But.
Yeah. Chris, we're primarily wildlife centric. And tonight,
Really?
I think we're going to be talking about the heart a little bit more, but why don't you just share with people what you do and how you kind of got into the field that you're in?
Sure. Of course, I say that, jokingly. Of course, I know you guys are wildlife, both very talented. Took a look at your website, Ron, prior to jumping on here, and I've known Jason's work as well. Really, both of you just incredible wildlife photographers. So I feel very fortunate to be on the show with you guys. Yeah, Pictureline had me down back in the spring. We were doing the PhotoX there. Second year doing that with them, and I've had a long-standing relationship with Pictureline for many, many, many years, well over a decade. And I wanted to be able to repay a favor that the owner did for me. Oh, shoot, probably 15 years ago before he expanded, his massive footprint that he has down in Salt Lake now. And with this PhotoX, I've had that opportunity to repay those favors. So I got to give a shout out to Pictureline and Jens, their owner, and all their employees down there, because I have a really good relationship with them. And we probably wouldn't be sitting here together if it weren't for all of us meeting up at Pictureline. So,
yeah.
So shout out to Pictureline. I'm a Western lifestyle photographer, primarily work in the editorial world. And then also, I'll from the Western work, I'll also do, high school seniors or weddings and stuff like that. But everybody that I photograph from that side of things, usually I know them from sitting in a branding pen together, roping or something like that. I say Western lifestyle, not to be confused with rodeo. My work exists in the ranch life world, and sometimes those two things don't cross over with one another. Ranch life being the day-to-day workings, being out horseback with your dogs, with your family, with your kids, working cows and following that lifestyle day after day. As a result of the stuff that I've done for 15 plus years, that's led to being one of the primary photographers for American Quarter Horse. And much of my assignment work comes through American Quarter Horse. So they'll send me out to ranches to cover their lifestyle, whether that be the best Remuda winner or just Ron, you and I were talking about you're up in Douglas, and I've done quite a bit of work up there on two of those big ranches, the Wagon Hound and the Henrys over at the 88. So all of majority of my work is yes, Western lifestyle, and then that goes into the editorial where I go out on assignment and shoot for American Quarter Horse. I also my photography experience, I was brought up through the portrait world, and having that portrait experience has led to jobs like shooting Ryan Bingham cover and spread for Cowboys and Indians magazine, or putting another, and we've had a couple covers for Cowboys and Indians last year, Western Horseman, but many print publications have fallen by the wayside, with the internet and whatnot.
That's kind of, just getting that little bit of background, and that is the world that you presented when we were there. And obviously that is kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight, was shooting your passion, because your passion comes through your images. And so if you're shooting something, so for instance, I dabble in real estate photography. I photograph people and do some portraits, just natural light portraits. But I can assure you that not too many people notice that. Most people notice me because of the wildlife images, and that's because that's where my heart is. And when you put your heart into an image, obviously it comes out to your audience. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I recognize with you, Chris. And so what took you into the lifestyle out of why not a rodeo photographer?
Yeah. Rodeo photography for me, I guess the short answer to that is it's the story that I connect with, and it's not to say that rodeo doesn't have that, because it does. There are umpteen number of stories, from the horse to the rider, both of them together, their journeys. I think for me, it's the everyday life cycle of ranch life that really spoke to me, and the parallels between being self-employed and being in ranch life. The way I say it, the way that I convey it to people that come to my retreats is, nobody forces you to go out the door in ranch life, and nobody forces you to go out the door when you're self-employed either. But if you don't, there are true consequences, there are real consequences for not doing that, whether that's the lives of your animals that you care for and you look after, or whether it's your livelihood. If my wife and I, if I put down my camera tomorrow, there will be significant consequences for our lifestyle. And that's as real as it gets. So, Jason, you were saying, "Hey, thanks for, being on here." And you got me between dinner and getting up, at 5:30 in the morning to go ship some cattle tomorrow morning. So, but it's real. And Ron, connecting with those stories, ranch life really has given me that story, and I can trace that all the way back to when my great-grandfather came over from England back in the late 1800s to Great Falls, Montana, where I was born. He started the Great Falls Meatpacking company up there, and by the time I was born, I didn't have any. I didn't have any grandparents or great-grandparents. It was just my immediate family. So much later on in life, and I'm talking much later, like 2 years ago, before my mom died, she had me over to her house, and she gave me this buckskin coat that my great grandpa had made. Now, seeing as how I didn't have any extended family when I grew up, her giving me this buckskin coat that he had made, it has a tattoo, is the best way I can describe it. A tattoo of a cow in the middle, and it has his brand on it. And around the cow are brands from the ranches that he would get the cattle from. And now, when my mom gave that to me, it really gave me some kind of tangible family heirloom, which I honestly haven't had in my life. And so, Ron, when you ask, what drew you to ranch life is a broader sense of family to me. So that's why I'm passionate about it.
I think you can see that in your imagery, and we'll get to where people can view your work in a little bit.
Thank you. Can I say something real quick?
Please.
Ron, I just want to thank you for that compliment that you started out with. Your passion comes through the images, and it's that really means a lot to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I've always been enamored. I think we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but I've always been enamored with Western photography, Western anything, Western movies. My favorite movie that I told you earlier is Open Range. I mean, I could just go on and on, right? I've always had a passion for it, and so I'm genuinely intrigued to learn more. I even told you I'm going to try to join you on one of your retreats at some point here. So, because I think it'd be fun. I like the idea of broadening my horizons, right? To better my creative skills, to broaden my artistic eye. There's a lot of reasons, but not for any other reason than I think I would have the same passion, and I would love to try to create images like you do. Getting to hear you speak was awesome, and I wish that was recorded, and I wish our audience could go to a link and watch the whole presentation, because there was so much there. But what I will say is, if you ever get a chance to go hear Chris speak, don't miss the opportunity. you have a very storied career with a lot of incredible images, and the stories behind some of the images and the way you got them is, what you get in a presentation. It's hard to do in a format like this, but man, I tell you what some people don't understand what it takes to get an image. And sometimes the kind of images you're trying to get, you're putting yourself in a pretty precarious situation a lot of times, and trusting the horses, trusting the animals, trusting the people around you. You know what I mean? So,
well, I feel like that's something that the three of us here, can immediately connect on, because, I would venture to say that the work that you guys do, while the work that we do can be serendipitous, especially, after knowing our equipment, stuff like that, there's a fair amount of planning that has to go into where you're going to, I couldn't tell you. I could drive up the mountain. I couldn't tell you a thing, but you guys could, and I think I think great images, maybe better said, there's no happy accidents in great images. There's serendipity for sure, but to discount the fact that you guys don't know your equipment, or you guys don't know the terrain, or you don't know the animal, my goodness, there is a ton that goes into getting those images that you do.
Yeah. I think that's true. And one of the aspects of what you do that kind of struck me during the conversation, go down this path a little bit maybe, is, the relationships that you have to kind of build and garner with the ranch owners. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can just speak a little bit about that, because, you don't just get to go knock on somebody's door at a ranch and say, hey, can I come photograph what you do for a living? Right.
Yeah. Really good point. No, you don't. Historically, ranches are shut off. You don't just show up to a ranch and hey, here's my camera and I want to photograph what you guys do. Short of getting shot, you'll get your butt run out real quick.
Maybe, sorry, before you go any further, maybe just touch a little bit on why that is.
Yeah. I say this nicely. The ranch world has been shut off. In fact, during the pandemic, nothing really changed in the ranch world. Like, all this stuff is happening throughout the world, but nothing really changes in ranch life. You still got cows to tend. You still got horses to take care of. You still got a family to look after. The difference here is you're just shut off from society. And I think ranches deal with a lot of negativity, especially in this day and age. And one of those jokes, I guess, if you want to call it a joke, is, people say, I don't know why we need to bring up cattle and harvest them and stuff like that, when I can just go to the supermarket and get my meat,
Right.
And right. It's one of those things you're like, come on, that people don't really say that, but they really do say that. And while you have to be careful about who you let in, because that old sausage analogy, right? You'll eat the sausage, but you don't want to know how it's made.
Right.
There were good things that came out of the pandemic too, and that was a lot of these ranches, not the bigger operations, like people that I go out and cover on assignment, but a lot of operations went direct to consumer, so they can work with the state and the feds to sell a quarter side of beef or half a beef or a full beef or something like that. My brother and sister-in-law have a big ranch down in Scipio in southern Utah, and we'll get our meat from them. We'll get our meat from my friends that we run with. And I'm kind of getting away from your question, Jason. I apologize.
No, this is perfect.
Ranches are typically shut off because you do get a lot of negativity. People don't understand the lifestyle, and they immediately attack it.
Right.
And with the advent of social media and things like that, I think you've seen some ranches even tuck in harder. That there's still a lot of ranches out there that No, we don't want anything to do with that. They'll reject an article being written about them. No, we just continue to do what we do. And it's, fun fact, producers is a word that we would use for people that raise cattle. Like my friend Hadley and his wife Leanne, they would be considered producers. We would consider them cowboys and cowgirls, right? Or
Right.
a ranch.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of the meat that's produced in the United States is produced by ranches with less than 300 head.
Oh,
they're
wow.
not. While we have big, humongous ranches out there, i.e., Ron Wagon Hound 88, we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres, and the ROs down in northern Arizona where you're shipping out 1 million pounds of beef every year, that's not the norm. The majority of the production is done with organizations or operations that run 300 head or less.
Yeah, no, I don't think that was a deviation from the question at all. I mean, I think, everything's so politicized nowadays, and
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to understand where their food comes from. And, you mentioned that joke, but I've literally heard people say that very same thing as well, people kind of jumping on you for hunting or for, getting your own meat through, buying somebody's a side of beef or something as they eat their Big Mac, and it's just the disconnection from where their food comes from and how it, comes to be. So I think the other cool part about what you do is you get a chance to tell that story and present it in a way that shows people, right, what it's all about and how we ought to be grateful to folks. And
as photographers, I'll make a little tie-in here. As photographers, some of the unsexy stuff that we don't talk about is the most critical things that happen. Like, how do you train your eye to go through the culling process? This one, not that one. This one, not that one. You go back and forth. Yes, no, yes, no. And in ranch life, there's the unsexy parts of things that have to be done that can be pretty shocking on the lens. Stuff that we wouldn't necessarily put out to the public. But there's also an education there for people that, these things have to happen so that you can have your Big Mac.
right.
And as much as we would love to have local producers, feed our local restaurants and things like that, for restaurants, and I'm taking this directly from, I got a lot of things going in my head, but I do my photography retreats, and more than 50% of the people that come to my retreats are repeats. And one of my repeat customers that comes, he runs all the food service for a major resort town in Montana. So he oversees all of that, and we're having this conversation about local meat, and he said, I would love to use, local producers, but the reality is they can't keep up with my demand. So you have to, in a situation like that, you have to be able to source, and you have to be able to have producers that can meet that demand. And unfortunately, you can't do that all the time with local producers.
Chris, I know one of the things that you guys did, I think you did this spring, is so they had these photo walks.
Yeah.
During the PhotoX. And one of the things that I think you guys did this spring was go out to a branding. And I think of, I think of brandings when I was a kid. It's kind of like the barn dances when my grandfather was young. Brandings were where everybody got together. It's where all the characters came out, and you got to kind of explore who was who and what was what. And you kind of became, and if you grew up in it, it kind of made you who you were. I think about, the old timer that was keeping the tally. You've got the young kids doing a lot of the calf wrestling and that kind of thing. and then the guys with some experience are doing either the dehorning or the branding and that kind of thing. How do you go about? I mean, when we go out for a wildlife shoot, we've got a shot list in mind. How do you go about establishing that shot list when you're trying to create the characters of these individual brandings?
First, yes, brandings are a very unique sensory experience if you've never been to them. Sight, sound, smells. It's a buffet of sensory overload. So you said dehorning, Ron. That's very unique. That can be a very bloody process. Shot list, yeah. From the technical side of things, yep. Jason, I'm going to touch on two things, one from you and then one from Ron. So, yep, during the PhotoX for Pictureline, the folks that I run with allowed 20 people to come up and cover branding. Now, that's pretty unheard of. And this goes over to you, Jason. Like, these types of activities generally are not covered, especially by outsiders. To cover a branding, you need access, you need acceptance, and you need trust. Well, everybody has access to a rodeo. And if you stick around long enough, you might even be accepted in a rodeo, like, oh, here's Jason again for the 7th year in a row at the Ute Stampede. Like, man, we're tired of seeing him. But during that time, hopefully, you've built relationships. And that's where the trust comes in. So being able to cover a branding, and not only that, but be able to bring 20 unknown people into a branding, and these ranches, these folks that I run with, trust that they're going to not do them dirty, and focus on the worst side of it.
Right.
I don't know how to explain that, but Ron, back over to your side of it. How do you go with a shot list? For me, in this day and age, when I'm going out there, really what I'm doing now is I'm being nostalgic, and I got to check myself because I'll get emotional about it. And that's because my kids are all grown. My oldest is 25. The kids that I see in the branding pen, in some cases, I photographed them before they were even born, and oh, here's Jody and she's pregnant, and now Steele is 5, or, one of my favorite little cowgirls, my gosh, she's 12 now, and her brother 13, and just, I'm seeing these kids grow up in the branding pen. And so when I go out there, I'm going out there with the mentality that, what I wouldn't give for that 5-year-old crush your neck hug. Man, I miss that. I miss being a daddy. I don't know how to be a parent to an adult, and it sucks. And my oldest says, you got to roll with it, Dad. And I don't know how to do that either. But I miss it. And so my mindset when I go out there is really capturing those relationships, because I know that time is going, and it's going dang quick. And we don't get it back. We all know that, if you guys have kids, it's that lament over and over, like, where does the time go? And man, if I look back, gosh, I wish, I neither here nor there, but I wish that I would have a volume of images of me and my kids in the branding pen, when they were little turds and teenagers and stuff like that. And I go into it with that mindset that you guys, my friends, some of my best friends, they will have a volume of work of their family. From little tykes to now being teenagers that are looked at to as responsible ropers to bring the calves to the fire. And then eventually they're going to graduate. And my gosh, I photographed some of our good friends when she was 14 years old, and then did her senior pictures. And then just this summer, I photographed her wedding and engagement. Just like, gosh. Technically speaking, when I started out, and here's something I don't think I've ever told anybody, but the Western world, brandings in particular, really honed my creativity. Those taught me, that particular activity taught me everything that I know today. And that is my own emotional side and tapping into that. And I remember sitting in a branding pen years and years ago, and I remember just completely underexposing the image, or another way to say it, expose for the highlights, and you're going to underexpose an image. But I remember doing that and going home with it and thinking, holy cow, that's really emotional. Like I'm not used to that. I'm used to like exposing for the whole image, and I wasn't on that particular day, and I went down that path and have never looked back.
Chris, that kind of leads me to another question. And Jason, I'm sorry if I jumped in the middle of a thought, but it leads me to another question that I think translates to photographers, no matter the genre. Definitely us as wildlife photographers. But what I see from your work is sometimes, and this comes from growing up in a ranching family and being around that a lot as a kid and a young person. So you've got the big scene, you've got the wide open corral with everything that's going on. There might be 10 people wrestling calves and 3 people roping and that kind of thing. Yeah. So you've got all this going on. How do you train your eye to find the picture within the picture? That's what I tell wildlife people all the time. Find the picture within the picture. You capture it wide, but then narrow it down to, how do you train yourself to do that?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'll work backwards on it because I just finished up my last photography retreat of 24 up in Canada. And the folks' house that I had it at, I've been working with the wife, Holly, for, oh my gosh, many, many years, mentoring her. And she got us private access to a movie set. Where they filmed Billy the Kid and all that stuff. And so as a surprise, I took the retreat out there, and it's a completely different thing, right, Ron? Jason too. It's a different environment when you are creating the images versus waiting for an image or just taking an image. Your lighting, your posing, everything is under your control. A production shoot, and that's a completely different story to talk about. But production shoots are a completely different animal. And when I saw the whole group come into this western town, I mean, they're shooting everything. Yeah, it's like a buffet. It was like, whoa! And so the first lesson I gave them was narrow that vision down. Yes, I get it, man. You come in here and you want to photograph this corner and this boardwalk and that boardwalk. But we have to be very deliberate about what we do in those situations. Yep, I can show you the whole scene. And if you think about it cinematically, sure, that's what we're doing. You have a master, you have a medium, and you have a tight shot. So when I go out on assignment, what does it look like being here? What does it look like to be in this silversmith shot? Well, I'll use my 16-35 for that because this will give the viewer an idea of the space that this person works in. Then I'll do the medium shot. And the medium shot is, okay, here's what, and I'll use an example. This is what Don Brown's hackamore or rawhide braiding shop looks like. And then here's a picture of Don Brown sitting at his bench and he's braiding. And then the final one, the tight shot, what does it feel like to braid that rawhide? And then I'll get in there with either a macro lens or my wide angle lens and, show hands, show the bevel. I mean, the bevel on a 1/4 inch piece of rawhide is mind boggling. That they can put that kind of detail in their work. So in the branding pen, Ron, it's the same thing. And I get this over and over where people are like, I don't know what to shoot. Okay, give yourself 15 minutes and just focus on faces. That's it. Kids' faces, people riding, people on the ground, doesn't matter. Take 15 minutes and focus on faces, and then take another 15 minutes and focus on details. Spurs, the rowel, tooling on a saddle, tooling on a spur strap. How about mustaches or something like that? Take another 15 minutes and look and just photograph those things that are in backlight. Mm-hmm. Okay, now take another 15 minutes and just focus on those things that are in front light. Start breaking it down, narrowing it down. Now, if you ask my friend Hadley, I say, well, how many images do you come home with? I don't know. It depends on how long. Are we branding 300 calves or are we branding 20 calves? You know, it's going to make a big difference. Mm-hmm. But they say, well, how many pictures of ropers do you get? And I said, I don't know. Probably 3/4 of the images that I come home with are roping. And my friend Hadley will say, what's wrong with that? You know, but, you know, as a photographer, when I started out building these relationships and also building my business, it was easier for me to sell an image to a company. I can speak that corporate language. I was in the corporate world. That was an easy transition for me, where many people, that's not an easy transition. They can't look up email addresses. They can't reach out and draft a professional looking email that, you know, you can make a sale. So when I'm out there in the beginning, I'm looking for things like, you know, a non-personal image. So something where it could be anybody. You shoot them from the back, and as long as they don't have the Wrangler logo on their jeans, which 9 times out of 10 they do, that's a trademark logo, and I can't use that in a stock sale. That'll get me sued. That'll get the company sued. You know, things like that. So I'm going out with very deliberate things in mind in the very beginning because I needed to build a library that I could shoot invoices off to. Hey, I got this image, $500. You want to use it for a year, blah, 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 blah. You know, come up with the language and all that stuff. That was a no-brainer to me when I started out, but I know it's not for a lot of people. And then as the relationships continue to grow, it turns into more of a story. And you know, I shouldn't say that. It's always been a story, but I no longer have that focus of what I can sell versus, you know, something for them versus something for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in your talk at the PhotoX. I was very impressed with the amount of care you take with these relationships, and you know, you talked about it in plenty of detail, but the amount of friendships and the amount of people that you've known for a long time, and you've built those I mean, you're basically part of the family in a lot of ways with a lot of different people. You know, and very much so. What a blessing, you know. But
it is because, you know, right at the very beginning, you know, what I said, what has the Western world given me besides creativity? It's given me family, an extended family that I didn't feel like I had when I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I go into it like that. And to show up at somebody's ranch on behalf of AQHA, I don't work for AQHA. I'm a freelance photographer, but they just happen to be one of my largest clients. And when you go out and you're on the road, I still represent them. You know, if you're a jerk, when you get to there, I promise you're not going back out.
Right.
You know, there are, in my eyes, there are things that I consider professional courtesy, you know, that you just don't do. Like, I've never had a conversation with the art director from AQHA like, hey, don't publish the images before we do. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer to me. Like, you're sending me out on assignment. These are going to be used in a magazine a month from now, 2 months from now. But for a lot of people, that's not common sense. And that does need to be said. And I'm just reminded of it even at this last photography retreat. You know, not everybody knows that you don't inhale a cigar. You don't inhale it. You leave it in your mouth. You don't inhale it. But not everybody knows that. And the same thing goes with the editorial world. You don't blast images out on an assignment that you're working on for the future publication. God, that'll be the last time that you go out on assignment too.
Right.
But when I go out there, listen to their stories. And I've been very fortunate enough. I think I even Jason put that in the presentation that, it's not about you. It's about them.
Right.
I'm not there. It's not about me. It's about them. And it's actively listening to them. What's important to them. And when you gain that trust and people open up to you, I take it very seriously. I don't expect it. But I certainly protect it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was very apparent. There's no question. So one of the things that really touched Ron and I both is, and it really struck a chord with me, and this is where I got emotional, is your commitment to giving back. And that's something that has always kind of been in the back of my mind. I've been fortunate to do what I do as a serious hobby or a semi-professional, whatever you want to call it, for, going on 8-9 years now. And, I never really have done much to give back, and I want to, right? And so I'm working on some things, but that was inspired by you. And
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for all of us to try to give back however we can to any of the communities that we're involved in. So maybe just speak a little bit about that, and touch on how do you do that? How do you approach it?
Sure.
I that was a very touching story. So,
yeah. So whatever you do, it doesn't matter, where you don't have to be self-employed, you don't have to be a professional photographer, but you have a passion for photography, do good with your camera, whatever that looks like for you, what that looked like for me was coming up through the portrait photography world. That back in 2008, there was a movement called Help Portrait. It was a global movement. I know it's no longer around, but I saw what they did, and to be honest with you, you guys, I take this for what it's worth. I knew I could do better. Better being this. Better's not right. That's not fair for me to say. I could do more. So what I did, Help Portrait was show up, one weekend in December. People come get their picture taken. They leave with a printed 8x10, and that's it. I always felt like I could do more, and so again, it's that being able to speak the corporate language, like the language of photography, right? We have to learn the vocabulary before we can really express ourselves. Once you figure out the language that we're speaking, then holy crap, we have something to say. But with Help Portrait, I started in 2009, Help Portrait Utah. I would get 6 to 10 different photographers first weekend in December, and we would photograph for about 12 hours a day. Everybody needed to use studio lights because I cannot rely on, at that time of year, I can't rely on natural light. Everybody has to be using studio lights to be able to get the volume through, to provide these families this experience. So every photographer would have about 15 minutes with the families, and the families averaged about 5 people per family, whether that was a mom and 4 kids or a dad and 4 kids or mom, dad, 3 kids, whatever that was. It was an average of 5. And over the course of 8 years of leading and shooting that, we photographed over 12,000 people here in Salt Lake. But the difference was a week. So I would tell the photographers that they have 1 week to get all of the images done, and that's a lot. It's a big ask. So, you have to be relatively efficient on editing, but the good thing is your exposure should relatively be the same no matter what.
Right.
You're using the studio lights, same background, bang, 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 bang. We would return a week later to the location that we shot, and the families would get a free printed 8x10, but they would also get a CD of all the images copyright free. So, of course, we know what copyright is the ownership over our images. I no longer own those images. They belong to those families. It was so rewarding. It keeps you. I feel like you should always do something to keep you humble. Maybe better said, just always do good with your camera, no matter what. Always do give back somehow in some way.
Right.
And I did. And then um, one thing that I also know is when your heart isn't in it anymore, get out of it, because it'll end like a spoiled cigar. Just leave with a bad taste in your mouth. And I could feel that my heart wasn't in it, like it used to be in the beginning. And so I was able to successfully transition all of it over to another nonprofit who took it global. So,
Oh, wow. Very cool. I didn't realize. I think I missed that part of it where it's, it's growing into something bigger even. So that's really cool. So,
yeah. The folks that do it now, they're out of Utah County. It's called Your Light International, I think. Yeah, they still do it. They go over to Africa, and they'll go to different countries and stuff.
gotcha.
And they still do some give back work here in the state as well.
Yeah. I don't know. That really just struck me, and just maybe to follow on for all the folks listening. That really got me thinking, and it really stuck with me. And I keep saying it, but I can't tell you how much it like stuck with me. Like I need to figure out a way to give back, to do good with my camera. And it's my career to this point has been very selfish, if you will, and not intentionally, but
yeah, it's all good. Yeah,
but you know what I mean? It has been selfish. Yep. When I think about it and be honest with myself. I've been focused on me and my images and what I can do with them and how I can benefit from my images. And it really changed the tone of that for me. And so I appreciate that anyways, but yeah.
Yeah, do good with your cameras.
So I like that simplicity, but yeah.
I have never charged any family to come cover their branding, ever. Everybody, I go out, I cover branding, and everybody gets a Dropbox folder of all the images that I take, and I've never charged for that in 15 years.
Wow.
It's just, it's a way of giving back. While I don't outwardly do help portrait anymore, within the ag community, this is how I give back.
Right.
I was just going to say, and I apologize for stepping on you there, but I think that's where there's some overlap between what you do and what we do. There's a lot of times where we're photographing on private land, and to not ask for that for free, but provide images. I think one of the things and one of the reasons that there's kind of a disconnect between the world that you cover and the world that we cover is because people don't appreciate ranchers as being stewards of more than just their cattle or more than just their sheep. Yeah. They are stewards of the land.
Yes, they are.
They care about the wildlife as much as they do the animals that they raise, that they breed. And I think that that's missed out a lot. And the heart of the ranchers as a steward, I think, is one of those areas that we as wildlife photographers need to celebrate as well, and probably spend some more time on. And so that
I was coming down from Laramie Peak with Garrett Henry just less than a year ago. We had taken 20-some 2-year-old colts up to their property up there. I was on assignment for AQHA, doing some colts starting up there. And as we were coming back down, I remember Garrett said, "Yeah, come fall, everybody's your best friend."
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I hear that.
But and that is true. And that, even my granddad, I remember the people that got to come out and hunt and spend time on the ranch were the people that it wasn't much. He didn't charge back then, but they were the people that brought him gifts. Wisconsin guys that would come out and bring him cheese and dairy products every year. And that something as simple as that, and something as simple as giving a rancher an image of a critter that you captured on his property is going to go a long ways to getting you invited back.
Yeah. You know what? And this just translates to business. And business is being self-employed. It's not about that one transaction. It never is. The intangible value of building a relationship is so much more valuable than just that, hey, $250, here's a print.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, you have to look at the much larger picture, and whether that is, that kind of give back, that, hey, thanks for letting me go on your property. Here's my favorite images that I got. You're welcome to, print them up, do whatever, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you letting me on there. And that's the way that I treat the brandings too. They just, here's the images. I get it. My gosh, you guys, there's a family up in northern Utah that I got this picture, and I remember the attorney that I use. This is years ago. He said, we're having this conversation about being self-employed, and he said, "Do you feel like you've made it?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think you ever feel like you made it. Like, it's just tomorrow's another day, And then I thought about an image, like, have I made it? And there's this image that I have of this great granddad chasing down his great grandson with a branding iron, and his grandpa is sitting horseback and has his grandson's feet with the rope, and dad and mom are laughing in the background. And I thought, you know what? If I made anything, it's that. It's this generational image that in 30 years, this kid looks back, because great grandpa died 2 years ago. He gets to look back and, hey, you know what? Here is this lineage. And that's what we talk about, Ron, with the ag families, and not just, not just the ag families, not just, hey, we're on the land and we're being good stewards of the land, but there's things like herd genetics. People have worked on herd genetics for generations that they have passed on. And shoot, in some of these fires and things like that, people are losing all of that. Great grandpa or great great grandpa started this herd, and you just built it up over generations, and then one fire comes through and eliminates it, completely gone. Like, man alive. Or horses, not just your cattle, but shoot, even your horses. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We've got that going on right now, unfortunately. The elk fire up in northern Wyoming is
right. What's it at now, Ron? Do you know?
Well, so 2 nights ago, from the time that we're recording, 2 nights ago, it was 50,000 acres.
Right.
40 mile an hour wind came up, and the next evening it was at 70,000.
Oh man!
And now we're sitting at about 78,000.
Oh, geez.
And it's only
where's it at?
10% contained, up above Dayton, Sheridan, Dayton area. And it's starting to move toward. Sheridan is a very rich community in Wyoming, and rich in heritage and financially, because there's some big ranchers, big landowners that have moved in up there, and it's starting to encroach on some of those big ranch areas, and it's moving so fast they can't get a handle on it, and fire does what it does, especially as dry as this year's been. And if they don't get some help from the wind, and hopefully that fire blow back into itself at some point, it's going to be tough to get a handle on.
Yeah.
So,
Chris, I got another question for you. It's one we like to ask all of our guests, and it's one that could be anything. It doesn't have to be related to what you do for a living. It doesn't have to be anything related with a camera even. It might be, who knows. But what's your favorite outdoor experience or memory?
Good question. Favorite outdoor experience or memory? Boy, I've spent a lot of time outdoors in the work that I do. Wow. God, I can't think of just one. My mind is like hopping all over the place. There
You're
was
fine.
there was a time in high school that me and a friend went camping. I'm from Montana, and I think about it now. Like, did I really do that? Yeah, I really did that. Friend and I went out to the Bob Marshall, and we camped out there. Survived out there for a week, which, it's just a week. We were trapping rabbits and stuff. It's funny. Funny to think back on now, like, oh my God, we came back skinnier than we were, whatever. To even going camping with my wife up in Montana. But at this point in my life, like, one significant outdoor experience that I had was riding with the cow punchers down on the RO in northern Arizona. Those guys, as far as like cowboy traditions go, those guys hold the line. You wonder, where do cowboy traditions come from? They come from places like that.
Right.
Can
you explain that a little bit more? Because that I remember you bringing that up in your presentation too, and that was pretty incredible, and the recognition that you kind of felt from that, right? That moment that you had.
Yep. Yeah, there's nothing better than a ride out in the middle of nowhere. The quietness that comes along with it, you and your horse, those kinds of things. And the RO had that. So did the Wagon Hound. When I was up there, up where Ron is, the Wagon Hound is the same way. I mean, these guys are 300,000 plus acres. It just, it's hard to put your head around that. But you talk to these folks that ride on these ranches, and I think one of the things that you're going to hear as a theme over and over is, I love the quietness. I love being out here on my horse and nobody else around me. And of course, the camaraderie that comes with it, you want that as well. But you have to be good on your own too. You have to be a self-starter, self-motivator, however you want to look at that, and go out and do the job that needs to be done. That will always go down in my history as one of my proudest moments, being down there on the ROs with those guys, getting a compliment from one of their senior cowboys, because I don't ever look for it. And I would say, Jason, to lead into the cowboy code kind of thing, we don't run around calling each other cowboy. We do rhetorically, and we laugh about it. Hey, cowboy, that kind of stuff. We make fun of each other. But I think in your heart, people that need to run around and be called cowboy are chasing a target that can't be hit. It's not something that you give yourself a title of. I would even go as far as to say that if somebody ever said, hey, you know what, you're a good cowboy, that's going to come 50 years from now. It's going to come from somebody that you genuinely look to as a cowboy, and they bestowed it on you. A good compliment in the Western world is, you're a good hand. You're a good roper. You're good on the ground. You're handy. Mm-hmm. That's a good compliment. So when I come riding down this canyon and slide up next to, this senior cowboy on this outfit, he looks back at me and says, you know what, you done good up there. Like, whoa, that's the kind of stuff that gets a guy emotional. That is, holy crap. Right. Did you just say it to me? Because there's no one else around me. I'm like, oh my gosh. That's something I'll never forget. And the experience on the horses and being outdoors on that particular ranch, that's a big memory for me.
Yeah. It's funny. You spoke of something that goes right back to where your heart's at, and again, that just shines through in your images. I mean, your work's incredible. As soon as I came across your page, which was about a year and a half ago, I was just blown away. I was like, who is this guy? And then I found out you were local in Green City. I'm like, man, this is cool. He lives around the corner from my parents, I think, I might actually be able to talk to this guy someday, so.
Yeah, you're up at, Are you in West Haven?
I am in West Haven. Yeah. Yeah. Not too
okay.
far.
So
My parents live on North Plain City Road, actually. So.
Okay. You're 20, 30 minutes south of me.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
right up on the Weaver River.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Separating Plain City and Ogden. Yeah.
I see. Yep. I know right the area you're talking. So.
Speaking of Laramie Peak, we're headed up there.
Oh, are you? Is that where you're going to shoot?
10 minutes. Yep.
Yeah. Right on. Right on.
Nice.
But I just wanted to make sure people knew where to find you and where they could see your work, Chris, because I think it's no matter whether you're a Western lifestyle fan or not, just seeing the heart of the work and seeing the vision that you have, I think is important for folks. And again, can't thank you enough for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So where can people find you?
Yep. Website is cdphotog.com, and that follows through with all of my socials as well, from Insta to Facebook. So CD
and you do retreats and photography. I don't know what you'd call it. I guess you do workshops and retreats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are all available and listed on your website, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they sure are, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just recently released the 2025 retreats, so a little more than half are sold out right now. So still have spots at a ranch life retreat in May down in Kansas, and got some spots open at a lighting masterclass here. So.
Okay, great. And one more thing, are you shooting the new R5? I know you're a Canon guy. Are you shooting the new R5 Mark II yet?
No. I just have two R5s that I keep plugging away on.
Right. Yeah. I get it.
Good job waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can't shoot with what you don't have.
Well, thank you again, Chris, and Jason. Thanks for reaching out to Chris and getting him on tonight. I know it's a little break from what we usually talk about on the podcast, but I think getting to the heart of the photographer, the heart of what drives the images that are produced, I think is critical to what we do as well. And Chris, can't say it enough. That shines through in you, and we thank you for it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliments, and I appreciate being on with you guys. So thank you.
That's a wrap for another episode of Beyond the Wild podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Pictureline.com, your online source for everything photography, and Canon USA. Follow us on Instagram at Beyond the Wild Podcast, and make sure to check out our website at beyondthewildpodcast.com for additional show notes, information, and photographs for all of our episodes. You can watch our podcast on YouTube, where we'll include video and photo content, and subscribe. We welcome your comments, questions, and feedback on all of our social media platforms. We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Wild podcast. Until next time, embrace adventure in the great outdoors with a camera in hand.